Hello, Miami. How's everyone doing out there? My name is Grace Meatley. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and moved to the United States when I was 10 years old. I came to South Florida in 1989, and I'm proud to have been serving this community as a nurse for more than 2 decades. I became a nurse because I wanted to help people and to make a difference. I love my job, I love my coworkers, and I love this community. But when COVID-19 hit South Florida, it hit us really hard. Miami became an epicenter for this virus, and it was very difficult for our patients, but it was also very difficult and hard for my colleagues and fellow healthcare workers. It was stressful. We had to wear PPE for over 12 hours a day. And many of us worried that we were putting our loved ones at risk. I care for my elderly mother, and it became very hard here in South Florida. I went for 3 months without seeing my mother because I was afraid that I would get COVID and somehow get her infected. And if Joe Biden becomes president, I won't have to worry about that any longer. Joe will set the right example of president. He will follow the science, and he will implement a national plan to get this virus under control. Woo! Working in healthcare, I've seen firsthand how real leadership can make a difference in the lives of people. After the Affordable Care Act became law, it was like night and day for so many of the families that come to our hospital. I don't think the choice in this election could be any clearer. We have seen Joe Biden's record on healthcare. We have seen him handle crisis after crisis. Compare that to the man in the White House right now, who has absolutely failed our community by every metric. We have to get out and vote, South Florida. If you have a vote by mail ballot, I need you to drop it off. If you're voting on election day, make a plan. Where is your polling location, and where are you voting? And how will you get there, and who will you bring with you? We have a chance to change the direction of this country on every issue that matters to us. The power is in our vote. And no one has shown us that more than our next speaker. Obamacare has saved lives, maybe more here in Miami than anywhere else. Miami, let's give a big South Florida welcome to the man who gave us hope and has the three-pointer and is going to help deliver Florida for Joe and Kamala, the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Can everybody please give Grace a big round of applause? That was fantastic. Let me tell you, I love nurses. You know, hey, you. You know, I think we've all had the experience when a loved one's gotten sick. I remember when Sasha was like 4 months old, and she suddenly had a temperature, and she was crying, and it was midnight. We called the pediatrician. He said, look, get her to the emergency room, and it turned out that she had meningitis, which for little babies is really tough. And, we saw doctors, and I was, starting to tear up because my baby, I didn't know what was going on. It was the nurses who kept Michelle and I steady, who cared after Sasha, who looked after them. And, every time I meet a healthcare worker, I am grateful because every single one of us rely on them at some point in our lives. And it's because of their sacrifices and hard work that our families can rest. Hello. Is that working? All right. That's a sign that you guys need to give Grace a big round of applause. I love you too. Miami, that's why I came back. I was here just a few days ago, but then I realized there's still some folks who need to vote. So I've got one word for you. Tomorrow. After 4 years of failure and division, we have the power to change America. Tomorrow you can put an end to the politics that tries to pull us apart just to win an election, and that tries to peddle conspiracy theories and fear, when what we need is competence and hope. Tomorrow, in the most important election of our lifetimes, and I've been involved in some pretty important elections like mine, but this one's more important. And tomorrow, right here in South Florida, you can deliver the change that we need. But it's going to take every single one of us. As Grace said, if you haven't dropped off your ballot yet, don't wait anymore. Drop it off. If you voted already, then you need to get your friends and family to the polls. And if you need to find out where, you can go to iwillvote.com. Help them to make a plan to vote. Florida, you delivered for me twice. And now I'm asking you to deliver for all of us and elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as the next president and vice president of the United States of America. Now listen, I got to campaign with Joe over the weekend. It felt like the old days. And I can't wait to see him back in the White House, because for 8 years he was the last person who left the room whenever I faced a big decision, and he made me a better president. He has the character and the experience to make us a better country. And he and Kamala are going to be in the fight, not for themselves, but for every single one of us. We can't say that about the president right now. I never thought that Donald Trump would share my vision or embrace all of my policies, but I hoped, for the sake of the country, that he might take the job seriously, that he put in the work. But he hasn't. He hasn't shown any interest in taking seriously the work that is involved in being president, or helping anybody but his friends, or himself, or treating the presidency as anything more than a reality show that he can use to get himself attention. And the rest of us have to live with the consequences. And Grace talked about those consequences. 230,000 Americans dead. More than 100,000 small businesses closed. 500,000 jobs gone here in Florida. And his chief of staff, he's admitting what we knew all along. He was quoted just a few days ago. He says, "We're not going to control the pandemic." That's a quote. We noticed. America just had its single worst week of new cases. And so what's Trump's closing argument? Last night on his COVID spreader tour. I mean, he's a super spreader. He just goes around because nothing's more important to him than crowds to make him feel good, as opposed to trying to keep the American people safe. Last night he told his supporters, "Don't tell anybody, but I'm going to fire Dr. Fauci after the election." Don't boo. Vote. You know. And just in case you were worried he was taking COVID too seriously, now we find out his intention is to eliminate from his administration one of the world's leading experts in infectious disease. The one guy who's taken it seriously all along that he hasn't been paying attention to. He's been listening to the guy, apparently, who thinks injecting bleach might be a good idea, but not the actual expert on infectious disease. So they want to move out the scientists and the doctors who understand this disease and put in people or maintain folks who don't know what they're doing. Essentially, their closing argument when it comes to COVID is you ain't seen nothing yet. But this is the last chance. This is his last chance to explain why we should give him 4 more years. And what you hear him talking about is his inauguration crowd being smaller than mine. After 4 years, that's what he's still worrying about. Let it go. What is his obsession with crowd size? Does he have nothing better to worry about? Did no one come to his birthday party when he was a kid? Look, that's the difference between Joe and Donald Trump right there. That's the difference. Joe cares about you and your safety and your security. Yes, he does. Trump cares about feeding his ego. I understand the president wants to take full credit for the economy he inherited, but zero blame for the pandemic he ignored. But the job doesn't work that way. Tweeting at the TV doesn't fix things. Making stuff up doesn't make things better. You've got to have a plan. You've got to put in the work. And along with the experience to get things done, Joe Biden has concrete plans and policies to turn our vision of a better, fairer, stronger country into reality. He takes this pandemic seriously. He knows how much it hurts for grandparents and grandkids who can't see each other and hug each other. He's not going to screw up testing. He's not going to call scientists idiots or put people at risk or, as he did just a few days ago, accuse medical professionals like Grace of trying to profit from the pandemic after all they've been through. Ridiculous. Shameful. Come on. Joe will get this pandemic under control with a plan to make testing and a vaccine free for every American and make sure frontline heroes like Grace never have to ask other countries for the equipment they need. And his plan will guarantee paid sick leave for workers and parents affected by the pandemic and make sure that small businesses that hold our communities together and employ millions of Americans can reopen safely. Donald Trump likes to claim he built this economy. America created 1.5 million more jobs in the last 3 years of the Obama-Biden administration than in the first 3 years of his. And that was before he could blame the pandemic. We handed him the longest streak of job growth in American history. The economic damage he inflicted by botching the pandemic response means he will be the only president since the Great Depression to actually lose jobs. He talks about black unemployment, says he's the best president for black folks since Abe Lincoln. Really? Don't boo. Vote. His son-in-law says, black folks, they have to want to be successful. That's the problem? Really? Like 300 years of history is not the problem? Listen. When it came to the economy, black unemployment almost hit 17% during the Great Recession 10 years ago. Through hard work, Joe and I helped to get it down to 7.8% by the time we left office. And it kept on going down. Not because Trump did anything. This year it soared back up to 17% here in Florida. His buddies at Mar-a-Lago may be better off than they were 4 years ago with the massive tax cuts he gave them. But ordinary families here in Florida, they didn't see that. Now he won't extend relief to the millions of families who are having trouble paying the rent or having trouble making payments on their student loans or just putting food on the table because of this pandemic. And Joe Biden understands the key to a strong economy isn't more tax cuts for billionaires. It's lifting up the prospects of work in America so that everybody has a chance to succeed. And that's what Joe's got, a plan to create 10 million good, clean energy jobs, to protect Florida from climate change, to secure environmental justice. And he'll pay for those plans by rolling back Trump's tax cuts for billionaires. And Joe doesn't just want to get back to where we were. He sees this as a chance to make long overdue changes in the economy so everybody's life is a little bit easier. Whether it's the waitress trying to raise her own kid on her own, or the student trying to figure out how to pay for next semester's classes, or the shift worker that's worried about getting laid off, or the cancer survivor who's worried about her pre-existing condition protections being taken away. Florida, I need to talk to you about health care for a second, because maybe what Grace said you guys didn't hear. I want to remind you of this. Republicans love to say right before an election that they'll protect your pre-existing conditions. You know what? Joe and I actually protected them 10 years ago with the Affordable Care Act. Hispanics saw bigger gains in coverage than anybody else. Almost 93% of Hispanic kids got covered, an all-time high. Under this administration, Hispanic kids have lost coverage. Republicans have tried to repeal or undermine the Affordable Care Act more than 60 times. Think about that. Why would you make that your mission? Taking people's health care away. And with no plan. They promised. They said, don't worry, when we get rid of this plan, we'll give you a better plan. They've been promising that for 10 years now. Still don't have one. I keep on looking for it. I've looked for it everywhere. You know, between the cushions and the couch, you know, it's nowhere to be found. Instead, they've attacked the Affordable Care Act at every turn. They've driven up costs. They've driven up the uninsured. Now they're trying to get the Supreme Court to take your health care away in the middle of a pandemic, at a time when families need it most, with nothing but empty promises to take its place. And think about what that would do to families right here in South Florida. Miami-Dade has the highest enrollment under Obamacare of any county in Florida. Florida has the highest enrollment of any state in America. So when Trump last week flat out says he hopes the Supreme Court overturns Obamacare, what he's saying is he wants to take your health insurance away. Just said it. Joe and Kamala will protect your health care. Joe and Kamala will expand Medicare. Joe and Kamala will make insurance more affordable than everybody, because Joe understands that a president's first job is to keep us safe from all threats, foreign, domestic, and microscopic. So when the daily intelligence briefings that a president gets every morning has a flashing warning light saying there's a virus coming, the president can't be AWOL. When Russia puts bounties on our soldiers' heads, the commander-in-chief can't be MIA. Joe Biden would never call our troops suckers or losers, because he understands that's somebody's kid, somebody's spouse, somebody's mom or dad. When a hurricane devastates Puerto Rico, a president is supposed to help rebuild, not toss paper towels, not suggest selling Puerto Rico, not withhold billions of dollars until just before an election. are counted tomorrow. Don't boo. No, that's not something you want to hear in little Havana or little Haiti. That's not something that a leader of a democracy does. That's something a two-bit dictator does. If you believe in democracy, you want every vote counted. Joe Biden will restore our battered standing in the world because he knows our true strength comes from setting an example the world wants to follow. And that's a nation that stands with democracy and not dictators. A nation that can inspire and mobilize others to overcome threats like climate change and terrorism and poverty and disease and stand up for human rights, whether it's in Cuba or anywhere else around the world, including human rights right here in the United States of America. And here's the other thing. You know, I've joked about this, but everybody says, you know, that's a good point. They said, you know, with Joe and Kamala, you're not going to have to think about them every single day. You're not going to have to argue about some crazy tweet that the president sent out this morning. It won't be so exhausting. You'll be able to go about your lives knowing that the president's doing his job instead of suggesting we inject bleach. That the president's not going to retweet conspiracy theories that the Navy SEALs didn't actually kill bin Laden. We're not going to have a president who goes out of his way to insult people just because they don't agree with him. It's not normal behavior. South Florida, we wouldn't put up with this from a teacher or a high school principal or our co-worker. Why would we accept it from the President of the United States? Because there are consequences when somebody behaves that way. When the person who's supposed to be our top leader acts like that. It molds other people to be mean and cruel and divisive and racist. And it frays the fabric of all of our lives, and it affects how our kids see the world, and it affects our families and how they get along, and it affects how the world sees America. And that's why Joe talks about the soul of America. And that, more than anything, is what separates him from his opponent. And that's what's at stake in this election. Joe Biden cares about every American. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and I think you, those of you who are out there listening, I think he tries to live up to the values that we cherish, that we were taught, of honesty and hard work and kindness and humility and responsibility and giving somebody a hand up when they're down. You know, wasn't that what you were taught? That's what I was taught. You know, and we don't always do it perfectly. Sometimes we make mistakes in our own lives, in our own families, but we try to own up to it. We try to make ourselves better. We try to teach our kids to do the right thing, right? And when you elect Joe Biden, that's what you'll see reflected in the White House. And these are not Republican or Democratic values. You know, I was talking, we were flying over because we were in Georgia earlier today, and I was telling my staff, you know, if there was a Democrat who was behaving this way, the way our current president does, I couldn't support him. You know, if I saw a Democrat who was lying every single day, I mean, the fact checkers can't keep up. It's like just over and over again. You know, I would say, well, that's not the example I want. I don't trust that person to manage the country's affairs because it's violating the values that we try to live by. And these are values we try to teach our kids. They're not white values. They're not black values. They're not Latino values or Asian American values or Native American values. They're American values. And we have to reclaim them. Some of you saw, some folks, there was a Biden-Harris bus in Texas. And, they were surrounded by Trump cars and supporters. And at some point, some of it got dangerous, right? It looked like folks might be run off the road. And look, the president can't be responsible for every single person out there. But he didn't say that's wrong. He didn't say in our democracy there's no place for that kind of intimidation or violence or reckless behavior. He said, yeah, that's great. Love Texas. I mean, what's going to happen to this country and our democracy if our leaders, when folks act recklessly and dangerously and irresponsibly, think that's okay, think that's fine? It's not. Imagine if I had done that when I was president. Imagine if that was reversed. Imagine if I had gone around in rallies saying, yeah, intimidate folks. We're going to send folks out and make sure it's harder for them to vote. And if they, people would have said, Democrats would have said, that's wrong. Well, you know what? This is wrong. And it needs to change. And you have the power to change it. But if we're going to change it, we've got to turn out like never before. We can lead, no doubt. We can't afford to be complacent. Not this time. Not in this election. The reason I'm back here, South Florida, is because I know some of you have not voted yet. Some of you haven't voted yet. Some of your friends, probably all of you who are here have voted, but some of you who are hearing me right now, some of you haven't voted yet. And it's not because you think the guy in the office is doing a good job. It's not because you don't see the pain that's going around because this pandemic has been mishandled. But it's because you're skeptical that your vote's going to make a difference. Or you're just frustrated because you don't think government can make a difference. And so I want to talk to you. I don't know what your circumstances are, but if you're hearing me right now and you haven't voted yet, I want you to understand it. A president can't solve every problem. Government can't solve every problem. But you know what it can do is if you have people in there who care about you, it can make things better. If we elect a House and a Senate, and a State House and a State Senate that are focused on working people and getting them the help that they need, it can make a difference. I wasn't able to make sure that everybody in America got health insurance. That's what I wanted to do. I got blocked. We got what we could. But you know what? More than 20 million Americans got health insurance that didn't have it before. Over 100 million people had protections if they had a pre-existing condition that didn't have it before. It made things better. A president by himself or herself can't eliminate all racial bias in the criminal justice system. That is a legacy that dates back a long ways. But if we elect district attorneys and state's attorneys and sheriffs focused on equality and justice, it can make things better. It can make sure some of the things that young people were protesting this summer don't happen as frequently. It's worth voting for. Voting is not about making things perfect. It's about making things better. About putting us on a track so that generations from now we can look back and say, you know what, right then in that election, we took a new path and things got better. That's how so many of us enjoy the benefits of others who voted in the past. Right? The reason we got minimum wages is because union workers were willing to work hard and sacrifice. And then that got better for everybody. The reason women have the right to vote and to run for office is because generations back, suffragists marched and advocated until they got the right to vote. The reason that I'm able to stand here as a former president of the United States is because people like John Lewis were willing to brave armed batons and horses and dogs and fire hoses to fight for us. The reason that this is a country that has embraced and accepted immigrants is because there were others in the past who were willing to make this journey to America believing that, you know what, we're going to leave behind the old undemocratic order, the old injustices. We're going to try to make a new life here for our children and our grandchildren. They didn't think it was going to be perfect when they got here. The folks who left Cuba or Haiti or Guatemala or the folks before that who came from Eastern Europe or you know, they did not expect that suddenly everything was going to be all set, but they were willing to take the risk and make the effort and put in the sacrifice. So if you haven't voted, just think about that. Compared to what our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents had to do, this is such a small thing. Typically, in most elections, a little bit over half of us vote who are eligible. Think about that. Close to half of the people who have the right to vote don't vote. Imagine if 60% of us voted. Imagine if 70% of us voted. Imagine what we could do. Imagine January 20th when we swear in a president and a vice president who've got a plan to get us out of this mess, who care about working Americans, who have a plan to help you start getting ahead, who believe in science, who have a plan to protect this planet for our kids, who believe in racial equality and gender equality and are willing to do the work to bring us closer to that point where here in America, it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter where you come from or who you love or how much money you've got. You are treated with dignity and you are treated with respect. And you can make it and chase your dreams. It depends on you right now. If you're not voting, I need you to vote. All of that is possible. All of that is within reach if you vote. For all the times, you know, people have asked me these last 4 years, they said, boy, how have you been put up with all this? And I confess, I said, look, there are times where Michelle and I were at the dinner table, we get discouraged. We're just surprised, you know, when we hear residents say, well, they're good people on both sides after a Nazi march. You know, there are times where we're discouraged by some of the outlandish statements that are made. But even though we've seen some of our worst impulses encouraged, we've also seen America at its best these last 4 years. We've seen folks stand up and be heard. We've seen folks of every age and background pack city centers and town squares so that families wouldn't be separated. We've seen the Parkland kids lead us so that another classroom wouldn't get shot up. So this would be a moment when we finally achieve common sense gun safety laws. We've seen healthcare workers like Grace risk their lives day in, day out to save somebody else's loved ones. We've seen people contribute and volunteer, help out their neighbors, look after that elderly person that maybe doesn't have somebody looking after them, bringing them groceries, helping them out. We've seen Americans of all races joining together to declare, in the face of injustice and brutality, that Black Lives Matter, no more, but no less. It's like Hispanic Lives Matter, no more, no less. Everybody's worthy of respect and dignity and fair treatment. And we don't want any child in this country to feel the continuing sting of racism. We've seen it here in Miami, in South Florida. We've seen it all across the country. America is a good and decent place. But we've seen so much noise and nonsense and misinformation. Sometimes it's hard for us to remember that. Sometimes some of us get confused. Some of us have friends who, they're looking at their Twitter feed or they're watching certain programs on TV and they're good people. They've gotten wrong information. But the truth is, we can do better than we're doing. We are better than what's been reflected these last 4 years in our politics. And I'm asking you to remember what this country can be. I'm asking you to believe in Joe's ability to lead this country out of dark times and help us build back better. I'm asking you not to abandon the Americans who are hurting right now. I'm asking you not to let down the young people who are out there marching because they believed what we had taught our children about justice. Help them channel their activism into action. We can't just imagine a better future. We've got to fight for it. We've got to out-hustle the other side. We've got to vote for it. The president's declared that he's basically planning to announce victory no matter what the numbers are. Well, you know what? If we beat him soundly, he won't be able to do it. But that requires everybody turning out to vote. That requires folks right here in South Florida to vote. If you are eligible to vote and you believe the country can do better, I need you to cast your ballots. Make a plan. Tomorrow we can choose to protect health care for our families. Tomorrow we can build an economy that rewards working Americans. Tomorrow we can elect leaders who reflect our best instincts and not our worst. Tomorrow we can choose hope over fear and unity over division. And if we do, Florida, if we vote like our lives depend on it, we will elect Joe Biden as president. We'll elect Kamala Harris as vice president. And we will leave no doubt about who we are and what this country that we love stands for. Thank you, South Florida. Let's get to work. Vote tomorrow.